Greetings and salutations, viewers. I'm StarPrincessHLC, and welcome back to Asagao Academy. When we last left off, we went on our first date with JonTron. It was rather sweet and adorable. He got us the necklace that our mom had. It was really touching. But unfortunately, he may be having trouble with his new bird trying to pretend to be Jacques. So, we'll see how well this is gonna go. So, right now I guess he's trying to teach the bird to say Romeo. And as you can tell, Hana is not impressed. John held a small chunk of a cracker before the new Jacques, who twitched his head from side to side. Romeo! Come on now, I know you can do it. Romeo! New Jacques blinked at John. John dragged his hand through his hair. He'd been at this for at least 3 hours. I'll just try to teach Jacques the word Romeo. It apparently took him the first 2 hours just to get Jacques to hold still on command, and now John was stuck on the very first word Juliet should know in the play. At this rate, I doubted his plan was really going to work out. If Jacques couldn't learn the word Romeo, how was he going to learn wherefore, or forsooth, or bane, or this is stupid? Don't worry, the first word is always the hardest. After that, it gets easier. Way easier. I nodded silently. This isn't going well, is it? Romeo, say the word Romeo. Say Romeo, for God's sake! John. I rested a hand on his arm and he glanced at me. You're right. Sorry. He swallowed, setting down the small cracker. Do you think you could take over? I need a break.
Yeah.
Sure, of course. John collapsed into his bed, a hand over his eyes. I bit my lip. He was so stressed out, and if he was wasting all of his time on Jacques, he wouldn't be able to practice. I turned to the new Jacques. It sure is a shame that this Jacques isn't human. You know, I bet a human and Juliet would be able to do this easily. What a weird thought, right? I looked meaningfully at John, but he was barely listening. I heard the costumes made a Juliet costume, too. She liked the design and wanted a life-size version for herself. I bet it's really pretty. It's a shame no one will be able to see it under the stage lights. John scoffed. What a waste of her time. Wow. My thoughts exactly, just ellipses. So what made you want to have Jacques play Juliet in the first place? John rubbed his face, exhaling deeply. He was mushing his cheeks into little puffs like a chipmunk. Jacques has star quality, unlike anything I'd ever seen. You saw him and you instantly loved him. He had an effect on people unlike any other. That it factor, you know? He was practically begging to go into show business, and if we could just make it happen, imagine where that would take us. A grin spread across his face. I nodded slowly. I'd be like, I don't know if I want to date this man anymore. And this Jacques is the same? Well, there's only one Jacques now, so he'd better be. There was a note of finality to his voice, so I turned back to the bird and questioned. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? Nothing. The play was only 2 weeks away. Would Jacques really be ready in time? If he wasn't, the play would be a total disaster. I looked at John again, my conversation with Mai from just a few days before bouncing around in my mind. If he got a human Juliet, almost all of his troubles would be fixed. He wouldn't have to worry about spending time teaching her lines because she could do it on her own. And then, instead of worrying, he could study. Mai said to look for opportunities, right? Well, here was one. I took a deep breath. John, I really think you should consider a human Juliet. Maybe you and Jacques, the old Jacques, would have been able to pull this off, but not this one. John sat up and blinked at me. I expected immediate refusal, but instead, cogs were turning in his mind. Maybe you have a point. A pained expression crossed his face, and I wasn't sure whether it was because he missed the old Jacques, he was mourning the opportunity lost, or he was trying to imagine the play in a different way than he had the entire year. Probably all three. Either that or he's thinking about eating. I don't know. But you know, what if we tried a new technique? Yeah, we'll let him outside if he gets a word right. That'll definitely be enough incentive, right? You clipped his wings, right? Because otherwise he'll just fly away and you'll never see him again. He beamed at me, and I was too glad to finally see him smiling again to turn him down. Besides, once John decided on something, that was how he was doing it. With a sigh, I turned back to Jacques. Romeo, say the word Romeo.
Hey.
You know, you've gotten a lot better with birds. I thought things would get worse after Jacques destroyed Mr. Bunny. Yeah, well, you know what they say, practice makes perfect. I'm totally gonna murder this bird in his sleep later. And it was kind of hard to be afraid of something when you were furious with it. Fair enough. It was the middle of the week and class just ended. John, as he often did nowadays, went rushing out the door as soon as the bell rang. I put my books in my bag, intending to follow to help out with today's shock training session when PBG stopped me.
Hey.
Hana, can I talk to you for a second? I'm in a little bit of a rush. Can it wait? I moved to step past him, but PBG threw out an arm to stop me. He's probably a good goalie, too. He is a soccer player, after all. I don't think it can, but let's not talk here. PBG and I headed out onto the campus, away from the flood of students and their listening ears. His face was grim, his hands firmly in his pockets. With each step we took, my anxiety increased. What was so wrong that PBG had to talk to me about it? It wasn't until we got to the soccer field, nearly empty considering it was just after class, that PBG finally told me what was on his mind. Is John okay? What? What makes you ask something like that? He gave me a look, one that said, I'm not stupid, that's what. I sighed. His grades are failing, he's hardly sleeping anymore. And on top of that, he's not showing up to meeting or paying attention to club business. He's one of the founders. He can't just leave everything to us. We're a team. We all need to work together. And now he's dragged you into it too. What do you mean drag me into it? I want to help him. Besides, I'm perfectly fine.
No.
I've seen you rushing off after every class, following him to our room. Then you stay until I show up after soccer practice and you rush right on out without so much as a hello. What's going on? Have you even had time to sleep, study, go to dinner? You don't go to dinner with John, do you? You guys aren't dating, are you? I grabbed his arms on impulse, gently rubbing them to prevent the boy from an immediate heart attack.
Hey!
PBG, calm down, please, calm down. I know things look really bad right now, but... But what? But they would get better? There wasn't a chance in hell that would happen, not with John being completely unwilling to take suggestions. But we'd win the tournament? Those odds looked bleak, too. I hadn't had time to practice since getting wrapped up with the new Jacques. I was just kind of hoping that my prior practice and Shane's advice, strategy, as always, would pan out for me. Then what? What could I really say? PBG seemed to be thinking the same thing. He took a hand out of his pocket and rested on my arm. We formed a weird kind of circle, both trying to comfort the other. He shouldn't be allowed to drag you into this too. It's one thing to risk his own well-being, but... PBG seemed sincerely distressed about what possible harm I was coming to. The thought was both charming and slightly ludicrous. In spite of myself, I started giggling. What? Why are you laughing at me? It's nothing, it's just... You're so thoughtful, PBG.
What?
What? I wiped tears from my eyes, struggling to calm down.
PBG.
You're always looking out for me. I really do appreciate it. Maybe I should have dated him first. No, it's really nothing. You're right that it's making things a little bit tougher on me, but that's okay. I volunteered for this. Things are bad, but I can't just abandon John. Not when he clearly needs me most. But I can't be there all the time. Can you try and make sure he's eating and sleeping? There's no way we'll be able to get everything done, and it's not looking like things will go well. He's only going to get more and more worked up. At the very least, we can prevent some of the damage that'll cause by making sure he's a little bit healthier than he would be if we left him on his own. PBG pouted, seeming somewhat annoyed. I felt bad getting him involved, too, but I knew I could count on him when I needed help. There's no stopping John if he doesn't want to, but I can try. But why is he like this? That's not for me to share. PBG glanced away for a second, running a hand through his hair. So you like him, then?
What?
What? No, of course I don't. Except you went on a date with him. There was that look again. The I'm not stupid. Maybe? A little? Possibly? Well, that's fine. Yeah, maybe you'll be good for him too. Maybe you'll be good for him. He sighed heavily. It wasn't at all the joyous, teasing response I expected from him. Do you not think we'd make a good couple? I know it seems unlikely. No, just the opposite. You guys would make each other happy. I can really see it working out in the long term. He sighed again. And why are you... Anyways, I don't want to keep you. We have practice today anyways. I better not see you in his room when I get back. Go home early today and get some work done. Look after yourself.
See you later.
I will. Thanks, PBG. Perhaps that was an indication to say, like, he's got a crush on us. He was, I think, one of the first people that was nice to us. I don't know, I have to rewatch that, but... Yeah, okay. I rushed off the field, hoping I didn't miss anything important during today's teaching session. There were only 2 days left until the first performance. Surely there was something we could do. Soon it was the day before the play, and the new Jacques was nowhere even close to ready. We only just managed to get him to keep his Juliet costume without throwing off the hat every 5 seconds. Aw, that must be adorable to watch. There's absolutely no way we were also going to be able to teach him how to act and make Shakespeare intelligible to an uninformed audience. John paced nervously before me, biting his fist. Bags lined his eyes, his face was pale, and every time I came over to his room was another degree messier than I thought humanly possible. From hanging around him for the past few days, it was clear he was completely consumed by thoughts of the play. I tried to distract him by talking of other things, telling stories, making jokes, but it was no use. John had a one-track mind. Even when I managed to engage him in something else for a second, he immediately listened to the play afterwards. Or likened it to the play afterwards. Could be both, who knows? Hey. Do you think we'll be able to get Jacques to do something like that? I had never been so near a human putting themselves under so much stress, and I had no idea what to do. At this point, I was worried about more than just the play and tournament. I was seriously concerned about his health. By the way, how's my... Yeah, my tournament points are not very good, is it? Oh boy. Probably not gonna survive the tournament, so... If he was like this now, how would he be 5 years in the future when his job or family's future was on the line? If he kept going like this, something had to give. I didn't want to have to watch that happen. I jumped. John stopped pacing and was now facing me, a look of utter defeat on his face. I really don't know what to do. I don't think this Jacques is going to work out.
Really?
What, really? You finally realized it? Up until now, he'd been adamant that it would just require a little more time. It's just I'm so frustrated. Absolutely everything else is going perfectly. The sets are done, the extras are doing amazing, all the other actors and actresses are kicking ass, the costuming is out of this world for a good school production. The lighting, the sound design, the props, everything is set for it to be a perfect play, except for this. And I don't know what to do. He collapsed into a seat on the couch, and I wrapped an arm around him. This isn't even counting the tournament. I've been trying to practice every night, but half the time I fall asleep when I start. And then PBG comes home and we have to do our assignments, and I stay up late doing those. I must be missing something. There must be some way to make this work. It'll be okay. Don't worry, it'll all work out. I mean, you're giving it everything you've got, aren't you? That has to mean it'll work out. It has to. I rubbed his back, staring straight ahead. Truth be told, I didn't think it was going to work out. The writing was on the wall. But I could see where he was coming from. Even now, I held a small sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, a miracle would somehow occur. It seemed stupid to suggest the grandiosity of a miracle for something as silly as a school play, but still. Maybe that miracle consisted of a simple choice. Are you sure you don't want to switch to a human, Juliet? John flinched and shrugged my arm off his shoulder. Of course not! I have a vision for this play, Hana. A vision! Besides, do you think switching now would do anything? She'd need her costume adjusted, the lines memorized, and we'd have to redo and realarm the blocking for everyone and find newly sized props, and she'd have to be sufficiently talented. It won't work. I clenched my hands together in my lap, running my thumbs over each other. Sure, it'd be a lot of work, but I felt like John was just determined to be as miserable as possible. If he wasn't so set in his ways, if he actually listened to other people's advice or suggestions, this wouldn't have happened. He honestly brought this all on himself, but he couldn't see that. It was Jacques' fault, or the world was a mean place. It had nothing to do with him being what amounted to, honestly speaking, a bad leader. But I gritted my teeth. What would telling him do now? He'd just get even more angry, no doubt. If he wouldn't listen, he wouldn't listen. It's just... John's voice caught in his throat, and he took a few deep breaths before starting over. A small pang of guilt hit me, but I shook it off, my head swimming. It's just that it's not just me counting on this to work. There's so many people who put in their time, effort, their passion. So many people who worked so hard, gave up sleep, hurt themselves, worried about this play. And now, because I couldn't teach this damn bird, it's all going to pieces. He put his face in his hands. I feel like George Lucas after he realized the Phantom Menace was actually a piece of shit. Has he yet? I don't even know. I mean, considering the one thing... I mean, you said it in your review of the Star Wars stuff, that the thing that he was the most ashamed of was the Christmas special. You know, Jar Jar Binks and Howard the Duck he was fine with, but the Christmas special was horrible. That one he had to bury beneath time itself. It's just weird. I rubbed his back, nodding. There was nothing else I could really say. The truth of the situation was that John messed up, and nothing I said or did would cushion the blow. John was in charge of the entire play. If something went wrong, he was, by virtue of that position, at least partially at fault, for he made the decision to do that thing or trust that person somewhere down the line. It won't be as bad as you're imagining, I'm sure. That at least was something I could truthfully say. John shook his head again, then wrapped his arms around me and buried his face on my shoulder. I stroked his hair, and we sat like that in silence. It was all we could do. Finally, Romeo and Juliet's opening day arrived. You know what you could have probably done, John, just saying. You could have had it like maybe somebody was up at the balcony or a soundstage or whatever, feeding the lines, like reading out the words of the play as it's being performed so it looks like the bird's saying it. Just saying. Would have been a lot easier. I made it to the theater an hour earlier than the call time, partially because of nerves and partially because I knew my costume was going to be an absolute bitch to put on. Slowly, the other cast members began to show up. Warm-ups were performed, makeup was put on, stretches were stretched. Actors were an interesting bunch. Some of them were completely insufferable, the kind of people who try to take attention from others because they definitely were making up for something else. That's the theater for you! Some were also shallow people who collected numbers and treated everybody like a best friend they hadn't seen in years, screaming out names and pulling them into bear hugs only to talk shit about them minutes later. That's girls in general. But some of them were the most unique, quirky, clever people you could ever meet. Some were humble, some were even adverse to attention until they were actually on stage. One in particular I hadn't even heard speak outside yes and no in his lines. There were those who liked the poetry of the words. Yeah, we're doing Into the Woods now. Into the woods, it's time to go. It may be all in vain, I know. It would be more interesting than Romeo and Juliet, just saying. Those who loved plowing the psychological depths of a given character, and those who treated scripts as treasure hunts or puzzles, reading them over and over for the single line that would allow them to completely reinterpret the character's motivation. There's not much you can really say at this point. It's Shakespeare. It's been around a long, long time. All in all, I liked the atmosphere, and this surprised me. I was a quiet person, a bookworm, and a nerd. I didn't really like having people's attention. Being surrounded by too many strangers made me nervous. Especially when I couldn't trust them. Pick me! Pick me! But here, people were energetic, people were funny, people were bright. More accurately, people were all over the place. It seemed like almost anything could happen, and despite the potential for a mockery, no one treated me like a weirdo. They just accepted my quirks as they were. I understood why John wanted to make this play a success and how keenly he felt everyone's passion and hard work. I almost wished I could keep doing it. Almost. But that only made it all the harder when John finally showed up looking like the actual reincarnation of the Grim Reaper, new Jacques in tow. Hana, you look great. I stared at myself in the mirror. Yes, great, exactly how I would have put it. Truly, tree is my most natural state. It's your spirit plant.
John.
Oh my god! Thanks, John, really, oh my god. That is the weirdest looking ent I've ever seen. Lord of the Rings would be way weirder if you looked like that, just saying. I'm honored to have the chance to play the part of Tree. Even though it was awkward to have swords flying in front of my face and people making out at my feet. How do you think things are going to go? You feel okay? John cleared his throat, then smiled. Of course, things are going to go perfectly, all according to plan. I just know it. John did not know it. The play opened to a polite smattering of applause. The first bunch of students rolled out on stage, gathering into an actual chorus line before delivering the prologue of the play. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. The scene switched, this time to a public area. I shuffled out in my tree garb, perching right in the middle of the stage. Muffled laughter came from the audience. My hair was still quite visible, despite me being a tree, before the actors started in on their lines. Well, if it was around springtime, you could have had it that your hair was like cherry blossoms, or something like that. Laughter quickly faded as an all-out brawl settled onto the stage. John's knowledge of stage light fighting coming out full force. The audience gasped and cooed as the actors slugged it out. To the odds, it must seem like particularly good acting, but I knew those actors sincerely hated each other. A few times I caught them actually trying to hurt each other. So far, so good. It wasn't long before Romeo himself came on the scene, decrying his unrequited love for the one unseen Rosaline. I narrowed my eyes. Romeo and Juliet was supposed to be a play about true love or something, but I didn't really see it. I know, right? It's more kind of angsty teenage love, if you ask me. I mean, it's like, oh, I just met you, and this is crazy, but I love you, despite every problem we have with our families. Let's run away and get married and just be happy, even though you murdered my family member and such. And then he gets taken away, and it's like, okay, I'm just gonna have to make him come back by pretending I died. And then he doesn't get the message, and it's like, oh no, she died. I'm going to kill myself with poison. Oh no, he's dead. I gotta stab myself with a knife. Very, very angsty teenager love. But the audience seemed to enjoy it. As long as things kept going like this, everything would be fine. But we weren't even able to teach Jacques Juliet's lines. I held my breath as the scene ended, and I shuffled off stage. In no time, it was Juliet's first scene. God forbid, where's this girl? What's Juliet? Oh, the bird looks adorable. Jacques twitched out on stage, glancing between the two, and just stood there, in silence. Oh no. Out of nowhere, a voice bellowed across the speakers. How now? Who calls? Damn it, John! I knew that was going to happen. Or at least I was hoping that was what's going to happen. John? Was John going to read Juliet's lines? Your mother. Madam, I am here. What is your will? The audience seemed a bit perplexed, but either way they went along with it. Well, considering Juliet is a bird. Just saying. A bird on stage was a novel sight after all, and they seemed intrigued to be getting somewhere they weren't expecting. Still, John wouldn't be able to pull this off for long. Eventually, Romeo would need to speak to Juliet. And when that happened... My lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready stand, to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. John approached Jacques. Juliet was supposed to rebuff Romeo here, at least at first. My heart pounded in my chest as John grew closer and closer. Jacques twitched his head from side to side. Please, Jacques, please tell me you learned something. And then Juliet opened her mouth. Whoa, my love, I am dying. Lay the sword to my breast, and poison to my lips. Yeah, I am dead. John paused, unsure what to do with this development. Whispers echoed through the theater, and I couldn't tell whether they were more from the actors or the audience. Have not Saint lips and holy palmers too? Dead, dead, I am dead. I am hungry, feed me. I hid my face with my hands. I couldn't watch. The play went on like that, the actors valiantly trying to work around Jacques' utter insistence of his own demise. By the time early intermission rolled around, the audience was audibly upset. People shifted in their seats, sighing and grunting. Women whispered cutting remarks to their husbands. The outrage, though concealed, was palpable. At this point, there wasn't even a plot. It would have been an avant-garde had John and the others known how to play off her mistakes, but none of the actors knew how to improvise in Shakespeare. They plowed through the scenes as Juliet said all the right things, and as a consequence, nothing made sense. I watched it all play out in front of me, trying as hard as I could not to cringe. Trees, after all, did not cringe. As the cast sat in a dejected huddle during the first intermission, John peeked behind the curtains, trying to gauge how the audience was taking it. People are even asking for their money back. At this rate, people are going to leave before the play's even over. John, I'm so sorry. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? The show must go on. John gazed at me. The other cast members watched us. The room's stuffy and silent. So it must. Hey, at least you didn't direct the room. It could have been worse. This is at least better than that. You're tearing me apart, Hannah! Is it? John fixed a smudge in his makeup in the mirror, probably caused by his nervous habit of rubbing his face and hair, then lined up before the curtain. The stage lights dimmed. Is it really? The play continued on. In a way, it was almost inspiring how the actors kept trying to give their best performance, how John bullheadedly continued with his vision in stark defiance of reality. The audience grew more and more restless as they saw the quality of the play wasn't improving. The more proactive of them trickled out of the theater. John grew irate. Backstage, a feeling of gloom and despair floated through the air. It was a doomed production. Everyone cared, everyone was passionate, everyone was giving it their all. But nothing they did would save the play. Actors quietly opened bottles of water, hardly speaking to each other. It was like seeing kids soberly lining the walls of a candy store. It was just plain wrong. I sat with them backstage, listening to the play when John came flying around a corner. Where's Jacques? He was panting heavily, abject terror on his face. Well, this is really not going well, is it? This is definitely not going well in the slightest. But I guess we'll have to see the epic conclusion of this next time, because this has been going on for a while, and it is not going well for John or Hannah in this rate. Ooh, this is not going well in the slightest. So, for now, this is StarPrincessHLC saying thank you very much for watching, and have a fond farewell.